Hey, it's the real you calling. Welcome home.
What would your life look like if you stopped second guessing yourself, stopped playing small, and finally broke free from the cycles that have kept you stuck? Well, that's what the Ignite Momentum Practicum is all about. It's a 6 week transformational coaching experience designed to help you break through people pleasing, self doubt, and codependency once and for all. And here's the best part, you get to choose your path. You can matriculate through the one on one accelerator. It's private, high touch coaching, you and me one on one. Weekly breakthrough calls, a custom action plan, deep mindset work, and real time support to help you reclaim your power and rebuild your confidence. Option two is the group intensive. This is where transformation meets community. Weekly live sessions with a cohort of like-minded individuals, hot seat coaching, Q&A, bonus trainings, and a space where you're truly seen and supported without judgment. So, whether you want personalized guidance or collective energy, the Ignite Momentum Practicum gives you the tools, structure, and support to stop circling the same patterns and start building unstoppable momentum. Ready to take the next step? Schedule your momentum call now at ignitingmomentum.co. That's ignitingmomentum.co. You'll find all the details there. You're not here to shrink, you're here to rise. Welcome back to Rising from the Shadows, the podcast where we discuss all things healing from trauma, reclaiming power, and thriving beyond the shadows of our past. I'm your host, Marlon Wesh. I'm a keynote speaker, momentum coach, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran, helping men lift the fog of people-pleasing and codependency to reclaim their power and live life on their own terms. Today, I'm thrilled to bring you another conversation with my guest, Danielle Pinals. Danielle is a licensed mental health counselor in Boston, Massachusetts, who's passionate about helping people heal from narcissistic and emotionally immature relationships. She offers EMDR, IFS, and group counseling to help people recognize abusive behavior, set boundaries, and heal from the effects of trauma. She uses creativity, humor, and compassion to hold spaces where individuals can feel safe to explore their inner world without judgment. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Um, Many of our listeners, including myself, at one point were all caught up in the fog of emotionally immature or narcissistic relationships, just trying to make sense of what's real and what's manipulation. You've been on the other side for a while now. Can you take us back to the emotional landscape you were navigating before deciding to go no contact with your mom, and like what inner work helped you finally cross that bridge?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it happened for me also at a really kind of young time in my life. I was in my early 20s when that was happening. Um, so I feel really lucky that I kind of learned about it earlier, but yeah, just want to name that. So yeah, all kind of during my childhood and teen years. Everything that my mom did, and I think like she's really just part of a system, because I felt like my dad was really part of enabling some of those behaviors, but just engaged in some really hurtful behaviors that I at the time had normalized. So there are a lot of things that I would be really afraid of doing because there could have been really nasty consequences
Mm-hmm.
if I maybe stepped a toe out of line, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. I definitely learned how to be the parentified child and kind of the child who achieved and like kept the peace, by knowing what the emotional temperature in the room was
Yeah.
at all times. Um, so that I think I look back at that and I just look at myself and like think I was a kid, I was a teenager, like there was no possible way for me to know that what was going on at that time wasn't normal.
Uh,
Um, and it wasn't until I got to college and started meeting other people and getting to hear their stories and seeing more healthy family relationships that I started connecting those dots of like something is out of place here
Hmm.
because I feel bad a lot of the time and
Mm,
I don't understand why. And that's what a lot of my college therapy was centered around, was learning about abuse and trauma. And
mhm.
yeah, EMDR, I started EMDR in college with that counselor. So I was really grateful that I could, because I learned a lot about myself.
Mhm. I mean, how fortunate that you were able to do that. I have been in some form of therapeutic setting since I was about 19 years old. I started not EMDR but IFS like a year and a half ago, and it's literally um, I would say I've made more progress in that short amount of time than I have in, I'm 38 now. Like it's so in all that other time. So how fortunate that you were able to experience that while you were still developing as an adult. You said a word that I'd like to talk about because maybe it's our hyper individualistic Western society, uh, but we seem to have a silo approach to things. Like it's a me issue, not a we issue. Use the word system. That
Mm.
you felt that your parents were part of a system, one where there was essentially a main aggressor and then someone um, maybe downplaying the effects or enabling the behavior. Can you talk a little bit about that and how abuse doesn't just happen in a vacuum, that there are different pieces that have to be actively involved for it to go on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think for me, one of the important kind of uh, doors that I opened with this was that there's a real difference between empathy and codependency.
Hmm.
And I used to think that if I just empathized and was able to be understanding of both of my parents, that was the right way to deal with everything.
Hmm.
And then I realized that actually what was happening was I was enabling a lot of the behaviors to continue because I thought I was being understanding and just giving them space to express themselves. That was kind of the narrative that was going on. But I think I say that because I think trauma happens usually so generationally. Often kids are really just reflecting what their parents are teaching them or modeling for them. So I feel like it really helps to have the understanding and the empathy that like my mom didn't learn like on her own like that, like to behave in that way. Like
Hmm.
I think she had some really abusive parents, and I imagine they had really abusive
Right.
parents. Yeah. And at the same time, as much as I think understanding that helps, I also think being able to not being able to have boundaries with the impact of my own mom's behavior, and distance myself from her so I'm not subjecting myself to that pain. Both of those can exist at the same time.
Understanding does not equal access.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I
Mm.
love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience too. Kind of the reverse. My father was the main aggressor, and my mother, up until I think I was mid to later 20s, I really kind of, maybe she was, but with the power differential, let's put that aside. Kind of viewed as a co-victim of my dad's, even though he never touched her or anything like that. But he was, you know verbally demeaning and things like that. And I now, as having
been involved in the work for a little bit longer, I'm like, oh wow, she just like watched it happen. And she did have power as an adult to effect some type of change. Because one thing I know is if there was anything within the areas of her interest that she wanted to see executed, i.e., religion, it got done. It got done. So she was selective with where she used her power and where she didn't. Um, and it wasn't until then that I was like, okay, I've got to put some distance between us. So, at this point, I'm no contact with both my parents and actually all my siblings as well because of you know their ability to turn a blind eye to the reality of things to just get along. And I remarked to my therapist how back then, after visiting my family, it used to take me like 3 days to recover. Like I'd be like catatonic on the couch. It was so draining energetically. Um, and I also felt that was just like normal. That just happened. Everybody has crazy families. Um, so that also resonated when you said that you didn't view any of this stuff as abusive because it felt normal until Kel Surprise, you got exposed to other people and other ways of living. It's like, oh no, this is not normal. Um, I
Right,
Let's talk about
right.
isolation. I know isolation plays a huge part in um, allowing abusive behavior to continue, so you're not exposed to oh, this is not normal. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
Yes. No, it also helps like hearing even like you're sharing and I'm resonating with so many of your experiences too, because similarly, I'm no contact with both of my parents and my brother and I are very, very low contact. That just happened naturally.
Hmm.
So I completely like understand that feeling of being isolated where there isn't necessarily like an ally in the family.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a really hard thing. And
Especially if
there's
you
even
felt that you grew up going through the same thing with like your siblings.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My brother is 5 years older than me, and that's been like a real struggle because he, well, even to I'll definitely talk about that, but even to back up a little bit, even in the isolation of it all, some of what even coming in here today, like I started feeling some of those old feelings around like, oh, am I going to be exposing
Yeah.
like what's going on
Yeah.
with my family? And this is probably the first platform where I have even like identified who it is. So I felt that part of myself
Mhm.
start to creep up and be like, you need to keep the secrets.
Yeah.
And that is part of the isolation. It's like it I still, even 10 years no contact with my mom, still have that kind of responsibility that I'm hanging on to like keep everything really
Wow.
quiet.
Yeah.
Um, so that I think even maybe just to name that for maybe anyone who's listening who like wonders about like the journey like a while after no contact, like it
Hmm.
can still feel that way. Um, and then as far as my brother, he was the scapegoat child. So,
Really?
yes, and that uh was a real that was actually the focus of my therapy during childhood was my brother was made to be the child who was kind of quote unquote ruining the family. Um, and he has made his own choices in life. Like my brother really struggles with addiction, and there are things that are his responsibility that he has to like do his work on. And at the same time, in college, that not even in college, in grad school, that was a major shift in perspective when for so long my parents had kind of been framing my brother as like the source of all our family's issues,
Mm.
and then to realize like, oh, he was a teenager, like he
Yeah.
was a teenager who was responding to the parents that we both had.
Yeah.
um so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
in a
That's so
nutshell what
interesting.
happened.
That's very I feel in some ways my older brother was a scapegoat up until I took over. Um, I mean, my older brother was he just had a thirst for knowledge. He was always reading. I mean, he was so boring. Like we'd want to play and stuff like that. He had his head in the book, and I'm talking about like crazy adult, self improvement topics. It's like how to do self hypnosis, how to expand your memory, but like just like learning as a teenager. Um, and obviously, when you're a curious person, you express your curiosity in different ways. And he butt heads with my dad a lot around that. Um, I I think, but he it was always internal, right? Like he never talked to people or saying my dad this or anything like that. I did. For whatever reason, there was always a little part of me that knew like something is not right with what's going on. And if there was ever an opportunity to ask for help, I did. And so obviously, as I got older and more proficient at communication, um, um, I tended to bring embarrassment by my very candidly talking about, like, I never hid anything that was happening. I never felt that responsibility towards my parents. Um,
Mm.
I felt that about other family members, but not my parents. And
Mm.
after that, and then especially after becoming an adult, like that definitely solidified my role as a scapegoat in the family, especially since my other siblings really. I mean, no conversation was had, but they just good old dad go to like just like right like especially after children were born, like as if nothing happened. Um,
Mm.
and meanwhile, I'm
Mhm.
still observing the same characteristics going on, and I'm like, "You guys don't see this?" One of the things I used to always say, I would say, um, "Dad is not a changed man. He's a deposed king. Like you guys are adults. There's literally
Mm.
nothing he can physically do to have his way. He can whine or what have you, and we've all gotten used to being like, ugh, dad is just like being dad. But he can't beat you into submission anymore. He can't do these things. And so he's not changed. He just, let's be Gandalf for a minute. It's just like you shall not pass. He has no power. His staff is broken.
Yes. Yes. I love Lord of the Rings. Thank you for that.
so yeah, and so that like very much solidified my role, and it was
Mm.
deeply heartbreaking because my brother um was the best big brother you could ask for in the circumstances that we were raised in. In fact, I remember the very first college essay I wrote was about him and how he uh, did his best to shield me and my younger brother from as much as possible. I mean, there were times where there was a time when I don't know what we got caught doing, or we are all doing something, but he got caught and he took the blame of it all. So he only got the beating. So that's the quality of a guy that he was, to now just being like, like fully exhibiting a lot of those same like narcissistic traits at the worst, or emotionally immature traits at its worst, and narcissistic at its um,
Mm.
I mean, at its best. Whatever, you know what I'm trying to
Yes.
say.
Yeah,
So
that's
seeing that was just like incredibly like heartbreaking, and increased the isolation because I no longer have this shared experience with my brothers that we were did everything together, and that also was taken away in some way. Um,
exactly.
what do you
Mm.
say to people that suddenly not only lose the adults in their life that were supposed to from day one to be there and care, to also um, your siblings or people you grew up with that went through the same thing and for whatever reason chose to cope by denying the reality of it and kind of leaving you behind?
Mm, um,
If you're listening to this and you've got a story to tell, whether it's your personal story of healing and reclaiming your voice or rising from rock bottom, or you're a professional with powerful insight into trauma, identity, resilience, or transformation, then I want to hear from you. Rising from the Shadows is more than just a podcast. It's a space where truth is honored, power is reclaimed, and stories heal. If you have something to share that could empower others to stop shrinking and start rising, I'd love for you to apply to be a guest on the show. Just head to tellmystory.risingfromtheshadows.com to submit your application. Let's rise together, one voice, one breakthrough, one story at a time. If you're listening to this and you've got a story to tell, whether it's your personal story of healing and reclaiming your voice or rising from rock bottom, or you're a professional with powerful insight into trauma, identity, resilience, or transformation, then I want to hear from you. Rising from the Shadows is more than just a podcast. It's a space where truth is honored, power is reclaimed, and stories heal. If you have something to share that could empower others to stop shrinking and start rising, I'd love for you to apply to be a guest on the show. Just head to tellmystory.risingfromtheshadows.com.
first, I just want to like recognize how hard that is, that your brother kind of, you watched that transformation. Like, it sounds like he kind of took on some of the narcissistic traits as you grew up. And that is so hard to watch someone fall that much. So I'm sorry. And
Thank you.
yeah. And then I think the really hard thing with the cutoffs that tend to happen once you cut off a narcissistic person. I was talking to another counselor about this yesterday. It feels like there is before you knew about narcissism and after you knew about narcissism, and after is like a different level of consciousness about people in the world around you, and I feel like that so severs but the relationships a lot of the time, because you have an understanding of what's going on in a way that other people aren't ready to accept, or maybe just are totally like, there's barriers like financial dependence on the person who's abusing them, emotional dependence on that person, cultural factors. So I think what I would say about that is that it's really hard, because this happens in the groups that I run all the time. People are kind of waffling between are they going to maintain their relationships with the people in their families or their systems who are dependent on that narcissistic person, or are they going to break ties with those people too? And I think it always comes down to like, is that relationship for you worth tolerating that this person probably will talk about the abuser? This person like may not be able to respect your boundaries with that abuser. They may try to like encourage you to reconnect with that abusive person. And it just really depends on the person. Like, you have like such a spectrum from like people who are still in touch with that abuser, but like may be able to respect your boundaries, that you're not going to talk to them. And then you have flying monkeys, which who come in and for people who don't know that term, that means they're kind of the sidekick of the abuser, and they're coming in and trying to almost like encourage you back into the system of abuse. That metaphor is from the Wizard of Oz. And in this, like, you would be Dorothy and the abuser would be the Wicked Witch of the West, for those who haven't heard that term. So
that's so interesting. what you said right there, it made me think about um, um, that part where you're talking about like may encourage you to come back. Before my awareness of all of this, I'm talking about like decade prior, I had been no contact. Uh, I had been no contact with my dad at a point, and it wasn't like I said like I'll never talk to you again, Dad. I just was like like I had so much going on in my life, and I wasn't calling him every Sunday or anything like that. So it just like the contact just pretty much stopped. I
Mm.
remember after um,
I'm really sorry about that beeping. There's probably a like truck in my
I
neighborhood.
can't I can't hear anything.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, yeah. Um, before I knew any about that, I mean, I knew my parents were like abusive or whatever, but I didn't. I thought once I left the house, I was safe now.
Mhm.
And my former romantic partner encouraged me to, in some way, like rekindle some type of interaction because she wanted our children to have both sets of grandparents. That seemed to me like a very fair, reasonable desire. But I still wasn't in that space where I could realize, well, if he's not healthy for me, he's not healthy for my children either. And I literally, the thought didn't even cross my mind about that. And so I reconnected with him, and also because of my brothers were like connected with him and things like that. Um, and, like, again, like, every time I would see him, I come home and I'm, like, on the couch in my bed, like, unable to really work or be productive for the next few days. Again, none of that saying, like, "Hey, Marlon, you should make a change about this." Like, I truly did not believe I had, any power because boundaries, what are those? Um, it really wasn't even, like, learning boundaries that I feel that saved me. Um, in my experience, healing from narcissistic abuse was more than just setting boundaries. It was discovering about who I was outside of being in survival mode. And I truly probably only stepped out of survival mode till last year. Despite all the progress I made in my life, across different things, like that was probably the first time I had to step out of survival mode and really learned to love who I was, even though I didn't know that's what was happening. But that was what allowed me to start, creating some boundaries for myself. And I know that you talk a lot about EMDR and IFS can play a role in helping someone kind of reclaim their internal world. How does that all function?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's so true about how finding yourself really is at the core of things. Like the boundaries come because you learn who you are and what your values are. Um, and I think the way I have found EMDR and IFS to really be a way in, I've found that both of these are really an inverse of each other. So even starting with EMDR, because that's the therapy that I started with, is EMDR is a form of therapy where you are asked to identify different memories, traumatic memories from your past. And so um, you process through those using eye movements, and sometimes there's a touch or an audio aspect of it, but it's essentially this back and forth motion, back and forth sound from your left to your right ear or left to right hand, um, that is supposed to help with processing the memories in a contained space so that you almost feel like you create some distance between yourself and that memory that allows you to not um, to lower the distress that you feel when you go and access that memory. So for example, a memory that I can remember of my brother running away from home is something that used to cause me a lot of distress. Like 15 years ago, I would not be able to just have said that to
We need
you.
to talk offline because my brother also ran away.
Okay, yes, yes, that sounds great. I mean, so like, but that is something that through processing that memory, in EMDR, I was able to create enough distance with that memory. It's not that it didn't happen or it erases it, but it's that it happened. It was awful and it shouldn't have happened. And also, like, now I don't feel triggered when I'm speaking to you about it. So that's this really beautiful thing that happens with EMDR. Um, and then when I learned about IFS and I got my training in that last year, at the end of last year, so now I'm integrating it, is these different parts of yourself that you learn about. So kind of I think the most pop culture version of it is thinking of the inner child, the inner critic. But there's multiple parts of
Hmm.
ourselves, and the idea behind that being that none of those parts are inherently bad. Um, and so through learning about different parts of myself, I might be able to go to the same memory and access my 11-year-old self who witnessed that memory and check in with what that inner child is holding on to, what beliefs about myself I've carried from that time to today. And through that, I think getting to know our parts and getting to understand them, I feel like we give them a lot of permission to release the burdens that they're carrying. And we can almost become uh, the adults
Yeah.
for these different parts of ourselves. It's almost like a reparenting of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I found so helpful with IFS was, and especially for someone who's, lived a lifetime of kind of being beat down, their emotions suppressed, was to accept the angry parts of me as like very healthy, and realizing like that was the part that needed that parent to protect them, and didn't have that protection, and now it's functioning to do that for me now as an adult. I can, you know maybe part with some of the maladaptive coping mechanisms, and find ways to express my anger healthily. But the dark sides, quote unquote, dark sides of me, my shadow, like, were the ones were the parts of me that continued to protect me from like further abuse or staying in situations longer than I should, and just to accept that and not feeling guilty, or that made me a bad person, like that, it gave me so much grace to just realize all the different functions that those parts had for me. With the MDR, you were talking about memories. What if you don't have a specific memory, but you have like a sensation around a situation? Does it still work in a situation like that?
Yeah, I found it can. It's a matter of targeting that sensation. If the memories are so fragmented or just inaccessible, because that happens all the time with trauma. We
Hmm.
just forget what happened. It's a way our brain protects us from the trauma. I find that especially for people who are comfortable getting in touch with their bodies, with those physical sensations, like with the emotions that are triggered from even just accessing like that feeling.
Hmm.
That's where EMDR can really help with that kind of a thing.
Okay. Okay. Um, I was in an unhealthy relationship for 12 years. Um, Part of it was, I think, because of my value system of, one, not giving up, and my belief in communication, and my belief in um, the sanctity of relationship, if you will. And so I just kept trying to be a better communicator, kept trying to express in different ways. And I think so many of us think that if I just explain enough, if I just show them how much they hurt me, maybe they'll change. What did you learn about validation, grief, and letting go during your own journey of cutting ties with loved ones?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, um, Yeah, I heard a little bit of your previous interview with Jovan and
Hmm.
a little bit about that relationship. So I definitely like resonated hearing kind of the grief aspect of that and the difficulty with like feeling your anger. So, okay. So even starting with that anger, I feel like that's a really hard thing for a lot of abuse survivors to reckon with, because a lot of the time, if we felt angry, especially when we were kids, if there was a parent involved, acting on that anger was so not allowed. It
Right.
was like there were major consequences if we expressed that anger. So we learned in a lot of ways to stifle it.
I don't think I've
So
ever been angry as a child, like expressed any anger towards my parents as a
yeah,
child. I don't think I have. So so
yeah,
suppressed.
exactly. So like I mean, it's so hard to even see your anger as a valid emotion, if we've dismissed it our whole lives
Mhm.
as being, it could be a real source of pain. So, and even in that, like we put on ourselves that we would be the source of the pain if we acted out of anger, and then we received punishment for it. So that's a huge barrier. So I think the first thing with that is recognizing that anger is saying I've reached a limit here most of the time, and identifying what that limitation is in terms of like what am I not able to, what's causing me too much distress, what feels intolerable about this, and then honoring what comes up, because what comes up is also this kind of secondary, usually really scary thing, which is if I don't feel like I can tolerate the way this person treats me, that maybe means that I can't have this person in my life, or I have to create some very strong boundaries with that person. And there's a grief, that's where the grief element comes
Mhm.
in, because actually our anger, we find out, was protecting us from letting go of this person and letting go of the hope that this person's behavior maybe was like salvageable, like that
Yeah.
maybe they could change. And I think that's one of the hardest parts, is that radical acceptance piece
Yeah.
of like, and I think because radical acceptance in a way, it can feel, and I think a lot of people really hate the term radical acceptance, and I think it's probably because the branding is really awful, but
Mhm.
like there is this kind of like playing God feeling to it, where you are deciding for somebody else that like their behavior is not okay enough that they can be in your life. It can feel like you're controlling somebody else. And I think when you're somebody who has been controlled and been the target of manipulation, like that can feel really icky. Like it starts to bring up those like, am I the narcissist?
Oh,
Self-doubt,
yeah.
like, am I being
I've
mean?
taken some of those quizzes. Am I the narcissist?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. I when you were saying that, it just made me reflect that in some ways I feel lucky that my childhood abuse had a physical element to it, because I can't imagine if I just had like a nasty mother or a nasty dad that just like said mean things that were deeply harmful psychologically, but like I didn't have the real tangible experience of having hands put on me, like how tremendously difficult it must be to kind of come to the conclusion that somebody's being abusive. I mean, I think that was my experience surviving narcissistic abuse in my romantic relationship. Right, like there's no hands put on me. Like that was the abuse that I was used to, and I think that's another reason why I let it go for so long, because I didn't identify it as an experience that I up until then had identified, like this is abusive behavior, that's abusive behavior. um and
Mm.
consequently, post me like walking away, I think not I think pretty much everyone in my life had that same experience of like, well, like there's no way that people have marriages are hard, relationships are hard, yada yada yada, but like it certainly doesn't rise to the level that Marlon is claiming it to be. And in some ways I empathize with that, even though I know that it was bad and how bad it was. Um, um, how how does one really grapple with that when you may not have, I guess, what society would call clear cut evidence that you're being mistreated beyond like grow a thicker skin? Um, how
Mm.
do you process that when your inner self just knows that like I got to put distance and like no one will
If this
understand?
podcast speaks to you, if you're on the path of healing, reclaiming your voice, or just trying to piece together who you really are after surviving the unthinkable, I want to invite you into a space where you don't have to do it alone. Join our Facebook group created for survivors, cycle breakers, and people rebuilding themselves from the inside out. In there, we go deeper. Weekly prompts, live streams, raw conversations, and a whole lot of people who just get it. No pretending, no pressure, just truth, growth, and community. Search Rising from the Shadows, The Path to Reclaiming You on Facebook, or hit the link in the show notes to join the community.
Yeah, yeah, I, yeah. I think that's what comes to mind so often for everyone when they're trying to figure out what to do about this stuff, because our brains are kind of wired to compare. That's the first
Yeah.
thing. And um, deciding between what is the most like severe abuse versus the most mild. I think we think to ourselves like, okay, maybe I can plan how much of this I'm going to tolerate based on whatever I come up with there.
Hmm.
Um, and so much of this type of abuse is seated in us not trusting ourselves and needing external
Mm.
confirmation of what we're doing, like always kind of checking in with friends or like, is this normal, that kind of thing. And so I think where people can get stuck is kind of thinking a little bit overthinking around like, is this narcissism, what is the label for this, versus what am I feeling on the inside, is this okay with me. And I know for me that was really where my ultimate boundaries with my family were able to be set. You were saying there wasn't a moment for you where necessarily you like spoke to your dad and was like, I'm not talking to you anymore. But for me, I actually needed that closure piece of knowing this has crossed a threshold where seeing you is it that I have the same thing as you. I would spend days stressing out about an anticipation of it. And then I would like just like have to lie down
Mm.
for a really long time after any interaction. So I actually wrote letters when about 10 years ago, when I cut contact with my mom, a few years ago when I cut contact with my dad, and then even a year or so ago when I cut contact with my grandparents. I needed for myself to have said, I can't do this because it hurts me too much. And for them, it wasn't necessarily about them getting it or
Right.
understanding it, but it was, I said the words to you that really say my truth.
Hmm.
And that really felt like what mattered to me. So,
Yeah.
and it's different for everyone, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Um, I think in some ways, so like not with my parents, but with um, my former in-laws, I actually left the door open for communication until they were severely out of line in um, quote unquote advice they gave, or just manipulative behavior to just kind of rein me in. Um, and me writing emails um,
oh,
really made it really helped me to draw a line in the sand, because I'm the type of person, once I make a decision, that it's done. Like, I may be like before, like, oh, no, no, no. But once it's done, I can't go back. Like, I'm not going back. So doing that really, my intention was to make sure that there was no, that I left no mental wiggle room for me to potentially excuse the behavior and reconnect. Uh, and so that was like the purpose with me writing those letters. And it
Yes.
just, the practice of doing that with people that I formerly had a lot of respect for and affection, um, it was enormously helpful. Enormously helpful. You use the word about trust and looking for external validation. I mean, that was me to a T. I remember when I got out of the Marines and I went to Boston. I was going to college. I had a professor that was that we were very friendly. She was an Air Force veteran, and I remember talking to her about like that. I always wanted to do some research around power dynamics, and which I still, if I'm bored one day, maybe I'll do a PhD in sociology. But
Yes.
my question was, and I feel so silly asking it now because she just like couldn't understand the question for good reason. So my research's question was like, how can somebody know that they are empowered without an external influence letting them know that they're empowered? I.e., if something is happening and I tell you to stop, and whether it's my argument or whether it's my sheer size or skill in martial arts or whatever that can actually stop you from exerting your own influence or your dominant. I mean, in my mind, I was like, that tells me that I truly am empowered because there's this external reaction to me asserting myself, that shows that. But if that doesn't exist, how does anyone know that they're self-empowered? She like just couldn't understand it, because up until then, I just had zero concept that there was any power that could come from within. Like, just like
Mm.
zero concept. I had severely lost all confidence and trust in myself. I don't remember if I ever had it before. And I just always look back at that and like smile at her bewilderment, because like, yeah, like healthily functioning person would be so fucking confused at a question like that, to think that, um, you need something
Yes.
outside of you to eh, have some sort of autonomy, which I guess it just technically it's not autonomy at all. But yeah, like that level of trust is so necessary. And once I realized that, part of writing the letters was part of what helped me to like sever these connections, that I would sacrifice my beliefs and thoughts and values in order to maintain those connections. By severing that, it just like reconnected me to myself. And then I realized, oh, none of this exterior noise matters at all. Like, not even a little
Yes.
bit. Like, not even a little bit. um
Yes.
and my personality, like, I'm a curious person by nature. I think a lot of scapegoats are. uh, and
Yep.
and so I've always like picked up on data in my interactions. And so it almost became a game, not like, oh, this is fun, but like, just like, oh, I did this really hard, scary thing, and people beat their chest and they rage, but nothing happened. Oh, that's very interesting. And so I, not on purpose, inadvertently kept just like collecting this data and just like realized, oh, most people are cowards. Most
Mm.
people that, yell and rage and manipulate, they're cowards, and they're hoping that you're as cowardly as they are. And so they do the big displays of anger and manipulation to scare you into submission. But if you just
Yeah.
like don't, like, one time, they don't know what to do with it. and
Yep.
they're not self-aware enough to even try to change their tactics. That's the craziest thing for me. Like, could you at least change your tactics? I know this one now. Like, like change it
Yes.
up. Like,
Yeah.
um,
It
what has been your experience about, like, once that fog is lifted and you're like, oh, this is what's happening, that's what's happening, and how has that helped you kind of like navigate through the world now?
yeah. Um, I think that is where it is really helpful to even like get some education around what narcissism is, or even just around what trauma and abuse is, because having names for things like gaslighting or control, that started to put the puzzle pieces together for me. And then when I had names for, okay, this is the behavior that my mom is doing, this is the behavior that my dad is doing, and all of it, like you're saying, it all comes down to this kind of get in line type of need, like for because if you're removing yourself from that system of like quote unquote normalcy, then you are going they're gonna try to pull you back in
Hmm.
because they want to like keep everything quote unquote running smoothly. um but I think um sorry, brain just had a moment. I think that when I was able to recognize those patterns and realize, oh, this isn't about me, um, all of that, what's happening with me removing myself from this is that what I'm actually doing is I'm holding up a mirror, and all of these people in the system are seeing themselves reflecting
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
And especially, I think this is one of the things, because it might have just added because I was younger when it happened, that especially I'm thinking with extended family, that they were seeing like, who's this kid coming in and so, like, because I'm thinking even the generation above me might have been like, get in line, like we had to deal with our parents
right.
being this way to
It's
us,
our
like
turn
who are
now.
you? Yeah, exactly, like you need to like just do what we say and submit to like all of this stuff that we've had to submit to for years and
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
And I think once I realized that actually like all of the behaviors that they do come from that insecurity, that clicked everything into place for me, where I was like, oh, everything that they do towards me is actually not about me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's it. As you're saying this, like, specific people are popping up in my head, in my life, that I'm like, before I even like identified what was going on with me, my heart would go out to these people being like, how can you live your life like this? You know, you are in your 60s and you're still like dominated by your mother, and all these things, like you don't use your voice because everyone ignores you, and the only way you can get attention is through not saying what you want but manipulating emotions into getting what you want. Like, how hard must this existence be? And so when I saw those same people try to essentially get me to adopt their coping mechanisms to stay connected. Um, yeah, I could see it wasn't about me. It's like, damn, you are living this life right now. Like, this is your person that's doing this to you. And I think they know as well. I know they know. I know they know. But it doesn't work for what they think they need in their life. And it's so sad. I loved how you use a lot of the same words I use when you were saying that, like, it was helpful to have a name for these different behaviors. Um, I use this analogy. I don't really love like gory, scary movies, but maybe it's because the way I grew up. I love like the Jesus scary movies where there's like a demon possessing someone or whatever, and the priest has to come in. Anyway, the usual lore around possession and exorcism is you got to get the demon's name before it can get out, right? So like the priest was like, "Tell me your name, demon," and they're like, "Blah." And, before the head starts spinning, like, die, priest. And then the priest finally gets the name. And then once the priest gets the name, he's able to exorcise the demon out. I think that's so applicable in our healing journey, that once we get the name of what's happening, regardless if it's um, you know, DSM accurate, but the behaviors match what's like happening, it's like, oh, I'm not making this up in my head. This is like real behavior that has been observed for generations, right? And it's not just me, because most of us are isolated in abuse, right? So you're not hanging out with other people that outside of your family members that are going through the same thing typically. So you just think it's you. It's just think I literally was saved by divorced ladies on TikTok. Like,
Yeah.
like that it was me going down a rabbit hole of listening to their stories and being like, huh,
Hmm. Yeah.
I know guys are the bad guys, but this is happening to me, so this must be really bad, you know? Um, so
Yep.
yeah, just being exposed to other people's experience was like what got the gears turning in my head. So I love that analogy that you brought up about like just having a name. And then I also like the second part where you said, and then letting it go, because it came to a point where I realized, okay, like it doesn't matter. Like I don't need a diagnosis. I don't need to see that they checked off every part of Darvo. The fact that they're pissing me off and they're
Yeah.
bringing disruption to my spirit, and then I've communicated this to them and they're like, I don't give a fuck. Like that's enough for me. I don't, like the searching for it to fit a criteria was part of my people pleasing. It was part of my codependency, that it had to be bad enough for me to exercise my free will in creating a life that I want for myself. That was like um, that was the big shift for me, to the point like I don't even the only time I consume any type of content about narcissism or whatever is usually when I'm preparing for these types of interviews, and interacting with like other creators. But like I don't need it for myself anymore, because I just need you to be an asshole towards me, and I don't like that. And then I can make some decisions around.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I've been kind of like interested in that part of the arc recently, because what I've noticed is that it seems like for everyone who's going on this particular journey, it's the finding the names, it's like labeling what the experience is, being able to have words to put to it, and being able to see other people are using those same words and
Mhm.
having those same experiences. And then I think this was definitely true for me. Like it almost had like a PhD in like all
Right?
of the narcissistic terms. Like I had researched it so much. And yeah, I got to that same point where I was like, it does not matter what we call it.
Yeah.
It's painful, it hurts. I don't want this in my life
Mhm.
anymore. And that felt like, I don't know, it felt like a cheat code or
Yeah.
something. Like we unlocked the next level.
I think it's a necessary process though, because I was talking about in like episode 5 of my podcast. I go through the whole cycle of specifically covert narcissistic abuse, and then at the end I end it with saying like, but none of this matters. But I also think that it's just kind of like part of the process, and so I'm not going to tell people to like skip it. Like there's a level of safety that I know is like found by like doing this research, so you can be like, oh, that is like maladaptive behavior, da 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 da. Da. And then at
Exactly.
some point, you just don't need it anymore. And I think that's just a very human experience, very human process. But I think people like, I think everyone gets there once they started. They get to that point where it's like, I don't need this anymore. And I love. For me, it was cycling in and out of Facebook groups, right? Like I don't need this survivors like Facebook group anymore or what have you. which I thought, which is like such a good feeling to have you just growing your self autonomy, just like growing, and now you're able to not even question. At this point,
Yeah.
for me, if I'm confused about anything, it's an automatic no. Confusion is an
Yeah.
automatic no, because you fucking know. You know.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
knows. Everyone knows. Everyone knows.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that sixth sense that you get for it. And yeah, I'm learning so much even through leading groups where
Oh, I
for
bet.
such a long time, yeah, for such a long time I've been leading groups where people are mostly starting without the terminology. And so part of the groups is that I bring in these handouts that bring the terminology in so that we can all kind of learn what that is and be on the same page about what we're all talking about.
Hmm.
And I've recently started a group from those, like it kind of was an ongoing from one of those starter groups, and they're a little bit more, I guess you'd say, like advanced in their knowledge at least, and they're now turning that corner, which I think is so cool, where like they're starting to say, okay, but I'm still just, this is just still all consuming, even if I know what a flying monkey is or I know what
Hmm.
gaslighting is. Like, how do I now just face the thing? And
Yeah.
it's been, yeah, it's so, I mean, I think you're exactly right. It's a necessary part of the process to go through the labeling, and then at some point you gotta get down to business
Yeah.
and figure out
Yeah. Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
want to deal with it. Yeah.
Danielle, I was talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but there's a beautiful duality in your work. Holding the pain and the humor, honoring um, the trauma while creating space for freedom. What moments in your own healing journey reminded you that joy was still possible, that there was, life and even laughter after abuse?
That's a really good question. Um, I think one of the biggest turning points for me, because my like healing in terms of relationships came from my friendships.
Mm.
Um, and I had a best friend, she's still my best friend. But she said to me at one point, like, Danielle, like, you need to accept at some point there's people in your life who are never going to leave you. And
Oof.
yeah, not because they feel guilty, or like they pity you, because you are you. And so that was sophomore year of college, huge turning point for me. The idea that like I was valuable and worthy. Whew.
No, I'm
I feel
feeling it
tears
too. I'm
coming.
feeling it too.
And so, yeah, I think finding those people, those are, I call them my chosen family.
Yeah.
Those are the people who were at my wedding, like that. Those are the people I surround myself with. And I think those relationships, for me, connection is the
Yeah.
kind of like key to feeling joy. And those relationships are where I find that. So,
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there's
Yeah.
one lesson that you'd want our listeners to take away from our conversation today, what would that be?
Hmm. I think um, wherever you are in the process of figuring this stuff out is okay. Being able to first just accept that it's happening, and being with that part of yourself, like as annoying and therapist-y as that can sound, like that acceptance really is the first step to being able to ask for support or ask someone for help, or yeah, to start doing your own research, go on TikTok, find divorced moms
We're
or
just finding
survivors of
divorced moms.
narcissistic abuse. Yeah. Exactly. So I think just being able to accept where you are in the process, no matter what there's no pace that you have to heal at.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for taking this time to talk with us today. I'm walking away with so much insight, and I'm sure everyone listening will as well. Um, where can our listeners connect with you?
Great question. And thank you so much for inviting me onto this. This
Oh,
has
my
been like
pleasure.
really lovely and nice to have like a space to talk about these things. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, listeners can find me. I have a TikTok and an Instagram that I'm on all the time. My username is at Real Talk Practice, and realtalkpractice.com is my website, and that's where you can find my services, individual therapy, and support groups. And yeah, I give some free content out on my website as well. So.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes when this goes live. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Rising from the Shadows. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. And if you can go on any platform that you listen to your podcast on, go ahead, give us a 5-star rating. I greatly appreciate that. Remember that healing isn't the absence of shadows, it's learning to thrive in your own light. So rise today, rise tomorrow, and rise always, because the shadow doesn't stand a chance. Take care.
If you're an event organizer, HR leader, or educator looking to bring a powerful voice to your stage, someone who speaks truth, ignites momentum, and empowers your audience to rise above what's held them back, then I want to talk to you. My keynote, Rising from the Shadows, is more than a talk. It's a transformative experience that shows people how to stop shrinking, start healing, and stand fully in their story. I've lived it, I teach it, I walk people through it. So if you're building a lineup of speakers who don't just talk but move people, head over to marlonwesh.com to create something unforgettable for your audience.